Growing disagreements between Ethiopia and the USA spilled over into an open confrontation when Ethiopian officials lashed out at Washington over new restrictions, including aid cuts and also a ban on some Ethiopians traveling to the USA. Now that this is the case, what should Ethiopia do? And on the other hand, will the US reconsider its stance on Ethiopia? Well, my guest today is Neamin Zeleke, one of Ethiopia's opposition leaders in exile. He was part of the Ginbot 7 movement, which embraced armed resistance to the Addis Ababa government. Now, an activist and also member of the global Ethiopian advocacy nexus, Neamin is here to shed more light on the issue. To stay with us. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
The restrictions announced by the Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Sunday amount to, I think, an unusual step against, as many say, key African allies, drawing on similar sanctions that the United States of America had on other countries. What do you make of this move?
Well, the U.S. administration decision to take such a punitive measure, we can say, is draconian. Typically, such measures, punitive measures, are reserved for the enemies of the U.S. Ethiopia has been a long-time ally in the fight against terrorism, and it has been an anchor for peace and stability in a rather volatile sub-region. And Ethiopia has also provided peacekeeping forces in the region and beyond. So what the Biden administration tried to justify these punitive measures on an ally, on a partner, is on the grounds of alleged atrocities committed in Tigray region. Mind you, the Ethiopian government not only has pledged its commitment to undertake the investigation into these violations, but also recently the Attorney General Office has made its findings public, vowing to hold those violators to account. But all these facts notwithstanding, the administration has pushed for such an aggressive posture and policy that is unjustified and draconian. The U.S. also has called for, repeatedly, in fact, for the withdrawal of Eritrean forces and the Amara militia. Again, this is an infringement on the sovereignty of Ethiopia. Therefore, unacceptable for any self-respecting nation. Ethiopia has a right to deploy and use any militia or regular forces under the federal command, just like the U.S. deployed, as you recall, its National Guards during the time of threat of lesser significance, as it did in January 6, when the Capitol was stormed and assaulted by insurrectionists. So Ethiopia has, under even international laws, has all the rights to fight any country for security and military purposes. So it is not in the business of the U.S. or any other country to dictate such matters to a sovereign country. So this double standard and such arrogance is not helpful to maintain the long-standing relationship between the U.S. and Ethiopia. Now, with regard to the double standards, take the case of human rights. We can look back and examine many instances where both the US and the EU did not take such punitive measures during atrocities, at the times when atrocities were committed by the TPLF regime, which they supported and propped for over 2 decades. We all remember the war crimes in Somalia region committed by the TPLF regime. There was a genocide in Gambela in 2003. The massacre of hundreds of protesters after they stole the election in 2005. These are just few of the instances. We can cite many plethora of atrocities committed in various regions of Ethiopia during the 27 years of TPLF tenure, where both the US and EU looked the other way. At best, they limited to quote-unquote expressing their deep concern, okay? Now, context is very important. Context is very important. The current conflict in Tigray has a context, has a genesis. But the EU and the US have chosen not to consider it properly, not to understand the complexity of the context. But you know, as in any situation, you don't want to address symptoms. You want to address the root problems, the cause for challenges and problems and conflicts, or in any other situation. Now, knowing and understanding the context and dynamics that led to the conflict in Tigray region is very significant. It is essential. As we have seen, there are frantic attempts to cover and create a false narrative. Or my friend Jeff Pierce recently wrote an article quoting Noam Chomsky, the famous linguist and intellectual at Harvard, of manufacturing consent by creating these false fake news, false narratives. You shape public opinion, you shape international opinion, you shape policymakers' perception. So you manufacture one lie after another, well choreographed and well organized and peddled both on media and cyberspace like Twitter. Now, the fact remains, when I say context, the TPLF was an overlord for over, 27 years. It controlled the state power. It controlled the economic resources. And of course, due to the popular uprising in 2018, the reformist leadership came, and the leadership of the TPLF retreated to the region of Tigray. Now, the prime minister, I believe, in my opinion, he gave them ample opportunity. In fact, some have called it a golden parachute, okay? He went backwards in many instances to appease these belligerent TPLF leaders. to make them part of the process. Okay, this is a very important context that the West does not recognize and appreciate and factor in its statements and policies since the start of the conflict. Let me add another point. I mean, there were many efforts of peace and reconciliation instead of retributions. This was extended to TPLF, with the exception, of course, of those who presided over the widespread gross violation of human rights, like Getachew Assefa, and corruption, the likes of Kemfadanya. Okay. Now, as we recall, the TPLF response for all these overtures for peace and dialogue, efforts of civil society and various groups for peace and dialogue, they increasingly took bellicose posture, belligerent rhetoric towards the reformist government. This was the norm, the daily staple of the TPLF senior leaders. They were taking turns over all kinds of media to insult, berate the new prime minister, starting from, the early months of when the reformist government came to power. It is very well-known fact that they plotted and executed both the overt and covert destabilization acts to make Ethiopia ungovernable for the reformist government. These are very significant facts why the conflict in Tigray started, which the international community and the policymakers do not want to address or consider in their statements and in their reports, etc. It is very unfortunate. After the Biden administration came, we have seen a departure from the previous position of both Tibor Nagy and articulated by Tibor Nagy, I would say, and also the ambassador, Mike Renner, the previous ambassador. What we have seen is that after the Biden administration officials took over, in particular, the Secretary of State gave statements in his tweets and official statements, and through spokesmen at the U.S. State Department, statement after statement, they reflected a false narrative that really kind of glosses, downplays the context of the conflict.
Now, as you know, Ethiopia is a strong ally of the United States of America, especially, as you said earlier, in terms of fighting terrorism in the volatile Horn region. Why has the U.S. taken such measures at the risk of these age-long ties between Ethiopia and the U.S., which spans almost more than a century, I'd say? We're also talking about the support, symbolically important support, which is about $1 billion annually, mainly in humanitarian aids. What do you make of that? What's the reason behind?
Well, but, as I said, I was trying to explain that there are a confluence of factors. Number one, the TPLF have friends in Biden's administration, very strong connection and relationship with former Obama officials who are now in Biden's administration. This should not be, underestimated, the role of these connections and contacts and relationship nurtured by the TPLF. Why this policy, why this push, why this aggressive has to do with that. That's one component. They want to save the TPLF. These people who are friends of the TPLF, they want to salvage the TPLF. They want to resuscitate it, the TPLF. That's one factor. The other
Mhm.
factor is uh, the role of the TPLF diaspora and TPLF hired lobbyists, heavy duty work, engagement, and disinformation they managed to exert on members of US Congress. Let me give you an instance. There was a hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations chairman, Senator Bob Menendez. He made an outrageous assertion, what I said earlier. And instead of the TPLF, he was accusing the Ethiopian government of starting the conflict. I mean, he didn't say that directly, but he said, I am quoting him,
Mm.
the government of Ethiopia is disinforming about the start of the conflict. In effect, he's saying, and instead of the TPLF, it's the government of Ethiopia which started the conflict. Now, such blatant disinformation is a cover up for TPLF, and it comes from the disinformation, organized pressure by the TPLF diaspora and by their hired lobbyists. We have to understand this. There are hired lobbyists who talk to the senators, who speak with these congressmen and women. So this is very important to understand where that push is coming. Now, I'm not saying this is the only factor. There are geopolitical considerations at play here. There are even strong arguments that the U.S. government does not want a strong Ethiopia, and some within the U.S. administration do not want the current rapprochement and partnership among
Right.
Somalia, Ethiopia, and Eritrea.
Mm.
And also there is a concern of the increasing influence of China and Russia in the region.
In this connection, one of the theories behind this movie is that the United States of America wants to install a weak and also an obedient government in Ethiopia, or a puppet, if you like, government that's willing to act according to its whims and desires. Does this hold water, maybe?
Well, I would not rule out or downplay that assessment because there were precedents where
Hmm.
the U.S. has historically intervened in countries, in fact, deposed democratic governments and installed, governments that, keep and protect their interests and that were malleable and did the whims and the wishes of the U.S. There were presidents. But in our case, I think it would not do justice to just say this is the only reason,
Hmm.
because there are many other reasons. As I try to, enumerate them and articulate them,
Exactly.
we have to understand all these factors. There is also an element that I think the absence of or apparent weakness, I would say, if not absence, of a well-organized, proactive public relations machinery or an outfit on the part of the Ethiopian government to control and shape the narratives in the international arena. So
Hmm.
that has also created a big vacuum because the international narrative was being, bombarded by false narratives and fake news because on a daily basis, the Although there are efforts, I mean, undeniably, and there are people we know within the government, including the PM's press secretary and others at the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I think we're more on the defensive mode than on an offensive, proactive, controlling the narrative on a daily basis, updating the international community on what is being done, what are the challenges, etc. So the narratives were being spun against Ethiopia time and again because of that absence of a very robust, strong machinery to uh, to advance the narratives in the international arena. So I believe this is a very important element in why the TPLF narrative managed to gain a hold and sway among international public opinion and also policy making circles. There are millions of Ethiopians in Europe and the US and Canada, but the, the response to this disinformation, the engagement with parliamentarians, senators, and congressmen was not well coordinated, well organized, because the outfit, the apparatus, the institution to organize advocacy and public diplomacy uh, was not there. We scrambled to create one, for, by creating a platform, for example, in the case of the USN, in Canada and Europe, they did the same. But ultimately, the bottom line, when we appraise what we did, although there was so much effort, so much time, so much energy expended, we were not much to, I would say, to the highly organized, like operating like a one army, if you will, of the TPLF outfit and their foreign backers. So they managed to engage uh, the international community at many levels. They managed to deceive. They managed to disinform. And our response, there are some platitudes and, some self-congratulatory, uh, you know, approaches which I disagree with amongst Ethiopians. I mean, we have made efforts, but we could have done more given our numbers, the knowledge, the expertise, and the experience of Ethiopians. But we lack that coordination, that organizational machinery.
Let's also talk
Uh,
about this. Uh, some people are calling this latest move or measure of the United States on Ethiopia a scramble. It's a clear demonstration of the scramble for Africa and also an indication of colonization. What's your take on that?
there is a history of powers for ideological and geopolitical interests to control and have a sphere of influence and control regions and countries, and that has been there during the Cold War, even after post-Cold War. So I would not say with the full confidence that that's the only consideration, but I would not rule it out. But given the geopolitical significance of the region, the scarcity of water and land for food, to grow food, and also some argued, recent article argued, Professor Ann at the University of Waterloo, she argued also there is another element, green metals for renewable energy. And because Africa and including Horn of Africa has large deposits, in the case of the US, new national security policy, green metals are one of the key objectives of US national security or objectives. So there are many concrete interests in the region, including the threat they may see, what I said earlier, the influence, the increasing influence and presence of China and Russia, even Turkey, and others in the region and the Red Sea area. So that considering that they may want to have a region that they control, that they can influence. But I don't know if it is we can't say it's a very strong word to say neo-colonialism.
Some senators, on the other hand, are calling on the United States to reconsider its position on Ethiopia. In this regard, how likely, in your view, is the United States of America to revise or reconsider its measures against Ethiopia?
Well, it's a very good uh, step, uh, and it was a breath of fresh air when we saw Senator of Oklahoma speak at the floor of the Senate, telling the Senate members and the public at large, televised, statement that it is wrong to tell the Ethiopian government to negotiate with the terrorist organization, the TPLF. And he expressed his support to the PM and the government, and he knows it. He has been in Ethiopia, and he knows the TPLF outsized role, domination, and overlordship in Ethiopia. He has dealt with them. In fact, he was not very critical during the struggle years. In fact, he was also he blocked or opposed to HR, the Senate resolution before 2018 that many members of our movement G7 and many other patriotic Ethiopians were pushing in many states by speaking with senators and congressmen. So what he did, what this does is it checkmates the ill-advised policy. It shows the other side, the other perspective. So it's a very important element. But I'm not sure if the position, however strong and also correct, of one senator would dramatically change the policy of the U.S., the current ill-advised trajectory that we see. So I'm sure they follow. I know they evaluate not only what the Ethiopian people in Ethiopia are saying, but the anger and the outrage that's being expressed by hundreds of thousands of Ethiopian Americans who voted for the Democrats, the Biden administration, for President Biden and the VP Kamala Harris.
Well, let's also talk about Ethiopia's grand renaissance down. However, the nation is grappling with foreign meddling in its internal affairs, all seemingly bent on thwarting these moves. What's your message to Ethiopians and the diaspora community?
Gird the grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam as a crown jewel project for Ethiopia. Why it is a crown jewel? Because it's not another white elephant project, but a project, a mega project that would generate energy through hydropower to provide basic energy, access to energy to 60% of Ethiopians who are in darkness. So that is the most important significance of GERD. It will avail clean energy, which also opens enormous opportunity not only for Ethiopia and Ethiopia, but for the region as a whole. But the Egyptians and the Sudanese are not looking at it as well known and documented and televised and reported. They are engaged in all kinds of obstruction, even further, trying to destabilize Ethiopia indirectly. So the Ethiopian people have to be determined to stand in unison. Uh, we have to defend Ethiopia, and the GERD has to be filled and completed so that it will be part of our sustainable development for to alleviate the poverty of the majority of Ethiopians, the abject poverty and the indignity that the Ethiopians find, partly because of lack of access for energy.
Well, Neamin Zeleke, thank you so much for your wonderful perspective so far.
Thank you for having me.
Well, dear viewers, many thanks for your company so far. Until I see you with another program, it's goodbye from Mish Faralak. Take care and stay safe.